George Mott, after watching an episode of Twilight Zone, pondered to himself of why nothing weird ever happens to him. Then apparently, that night, he burst into flames with no known source. A phenomenon known as spontaneous human combustion. This is Bizarre Ones, and I'm your host, Lacrosse. Welcome to Bizarre Ones, and this episode is about spontaneous human combustion. And I'm sure you've all heard of this phenomenon and been curious about it like I was. And all honesty, I couldn't find many cases of it and thought to myself, why is this no longer heard about, this unique phenomenon? If this is a common phenomenon that reaches back all the way into the 1700s, then why is there only 300 known cases of it? That's what we're going to explore in this episode of Bizarre Ones. So, spontaneous human combustion is defined as death from a fire originating without an apparent external source of ignition, a belief that fire starts within the body of the victim. Believers in this phenomenon believe the human body just can burst into flames. Now, right now, I'm not going to tell my opinion on this or Tonya's opinion on the issue.
Hello, everyone. I'm also in this episode as well.
Yes, Tonya is in this episode since y'all know this is how we do the podcast. One of us hosts the episode while the other one is the co-host of the episode. So we will come back to Tonya in just a little bit as, the show progresses, if you will. So the idea and the term of spontaneous human combustion was first proposed in 1746 by Paul Raleigh. I may pronounce his name wrong. His last name wrong. It's like Rolli. He was a fellow of the Royal Society. In an article he published in the Philosophical Transactions concerning the mysterious death of Countess Cornelia Zangaria Bandy, he had proposed that the Countess had died due to SHC. SHC is short for spontaneous human combustion, by the way. Later on in 1938, a coroner by the name of Gavin Thurston described SHC as having apparently attracted the attention not only of the medical profession, but of the non-medical professionals 100 years ago. Now, in this particular case, he was referring to a fictional account published in 1834 in the Frederick Marryat cycle. Larry E. Arnold, who was the director of Parascience International in his 1995 book, Ablaze, wrote that there have been about 200 cited reports of SHC worldwide for 300 years. So not a lot of reports like you would think, but at the same time, enough reports for someone to write a book about the whole thing. L.A. Perry wrote an article that cited an 1823 book, which stated these following characteristics for people to spontaneously combust. The victims are alcoholics in most of these cases and are usually elderly females. The body has not burned spontaneously, but some lighted substance has come into contact with it, while their hands and feet usually fall off. The fire seems to cause very little damage to combustible things in contact with the body. The combustion of the body usually leaves a residue of greasy and fetid ashes that is very offensive in odor. Alcoholic and alcoholism seems to be a recurring theme in most of the cases of SHC, or spontaneous human combustion, which started with Victorian doctors who believed at the time that alcohol was the cause of spontaneous human combustion. So as you can see, they believed most of the time back in the Victorian era that alcohol was the cause of SHC. The prevalent thing seems to be, is back in the Victorian era, the women that people claim to be victims of SHC were women that had a damaged reputation. So
they probably died another way, but the patriarchy wanted people to believe it was something like spontaneous human combustion, so they could claim it was some, act of God that punished these women for bad reputation or behavior.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. So let's talk about the few cases of spontaneous human combustion, because there were a few cases over the years but Tonya and I had selected a few of them for the podcast. We will start with Henry Thomas, who was 73 years old and living in Wales. The year was 1980, and he had been sitting comfortably in his chair at the time. According to the official reports, the fire had started at the top of his body before it had spread throughout his body, burning it into all until he died. The fire, it said, was intense to the point where all that was left of Mr. Thomas was his legs below the knees and, of course, a skull. Ironically, his socks were somehow still on.
Wait, his socks were still on? That's crazy.
Yeah, it really is. His pants, or trousers, if you will, were untouched in the fire. Now, it is said that he did have a fireplace, and many experts have said that most likely, when he was starting his fireplace, the top of his head caught fire, and he just didn't notice. According to this story, he just sat in his chair and didn't realize it before he burned to death. His death was ruled by death by burning, with no mention of SHC at all. So, though his death is often cited as so-called spontaneous human combustion, the official cause of death says there was nothing spontaneous about it, to be honest. It says that obviously it was when he was trying to start a fire in his fireplace, and that's what caused the fire. Like, there was like an ember probably on top of his head. And so
one can say that obviously it wasn't paranormal or strange or anything like that.
Exactly. Like, there was nothing spontaneous about it. Like, there was most like an ember of fire that, a little flame on top of his head, and he just didn't notice. He sat down in his chair, and he burned to death.
So there's also the case of Robert Francis Bailey in 1967. His story takes place in London, England, so another UK story like the one you mentioned, Kai. How this case was found out was there were these office workers walking and they noticed there was a fire in a building, and so they called the authorities as quick as possible. What was found was an unhoused man who had burned to death. The police officers first on the scene reported that a blue flame was being emitted forcefully from a 4-inch slit in Bailey's abdomen, which you must admit, seeing that, you would think something paranormal or extraordinaire. His teeth were said to be clenched down on the newel post of the staircase he had collapsed next to. Finally, they had managed to put out the fire by oddly forcing a hose into his stomach cavity, if you will. At first, no external means of fire starter was found at the scene.
And if I remember right, he was like an alcoholic, right?
Yes, that's correct. And he often drank denatured or didn't. I don't know how to pronounce that. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. Alcohol, because it was cheap. Now, for people who don't know what that kind of alcohol is, I looked it up, and it's alcohol without any beverage properties to it at all. It is often used to start fires if you are camping, or can be used to remove stains from clothes or upholstery. So the official theory is the alcohol in his gut somehow reacted to some igniter somehow, causing him to catch fire.
So these two stories of what some use as evidence of spontaneous human combustion doesn't really seem to back up the spontaneous part. It seems like both of these cases have logical and scientific explanations,
Yeah, it does seem that way.
And it seems the evidence of the existence of spontaneous human combustion is not apparent at all.
So far, it would presume to be that way. It would seem to be that that's the particular case and nothing supernatural or unconventional.
The next case Tonya and I found was that of a case in Florida in the 1950s. The case of Mary Reiser, Reeser, her landlady, right? Apparently showed up around her place around 8 in the morning. I guess she was going to go check on her or something, and so she touches the doorknob. I don't know why she didn't knock, but she touched the doorknob to the place, and it was hot to the touch. And I guess apparently she was yelling for Mary, and she received no response from the inside, so she called the police. Mary was found in the chair, similar to the Thomas case, with a part of her left foot remaining. It still had the slipper on, and her skull remained as well. Now, there are some claims that her head shrunk to the size of a teacup, but this was never confirmed. So it's probably an urban legend that people heard later, and probably not part of the case. So it could be an urban legend.
Like Mikey.
Yeah, perhaps we should have a future episode where we could talk about urban legends like that one and reveal what we found out about them.
Yeah, that would be an interesting episode.
So the Federal Bureau of Investigation, excuse me, said Mary was known to be an addict when it came to sleeping pills. The official story and most plausible with the evidence presented, she had taken some sleeping pills and fell asleep while smoking a cigarette. The cigarette caught on fire. This is in the official report. And experts say this is most likely the case of what happened. In December of 1966, we have the story of John Irving Bentley in Pennsylvania. The meter reader came to read the meter and saw the fire. The investigation, though, concluded that John did not die to spontaneous human combustion. Though his smoking pipe was intact, officials concluded that had been the source of the fire. So, so far with all these particular cases that me and Tonya have been talking about, there doesn't seem to be anything spontaneous. The fire does not originate inside the body. It originates from something else.
Another case that people try to document as evidence as spontaneous human combustion is Jenny Safran. Her case stands out because someone had actually seen her combust. She was 61 years old when she died, but had the mental development of a 6-year-old. Her father, who was 82, said that he and Jenny were both sitting in the kitchen when he saw a bright surge of light out of the corner of his eye. So he turns to his daughter to see if she had seen it, right? So he turns, and when he does, he sees she is on fire, but just sat still with her hands in her lap. He yanks her over to the sink to try to put out the flames and messes up his hands during that time. She died, unfortunately, 8 days later after being in a coma. Her case is explained that because her father smoked a tobacco pipe, and so they believe like a spark from her father's pipe had fallen onto her clothing, and a wind blowing by fanned the flame.
If you've all noticed a pattern, then you are correct. The pattern is that for all these cases so far, there was a logical scientific explanation for all of these cases, and none of them are pointing towards spontaneous human combustion, which makes one thing perhaps there is no such thing as spontaneous combustion. Now, I'm always one to say, when science and conventional wisdom hold no answers, might we finally turn to the fantastic as an explanation? But convention does hold the answers when it comes to this particular topic.
Yeah, it seems that this particular phenomenon, known as spontaneous human combustion, is a bust. Kai and I both tried to our best, right, to find evidence to say there was at least one single case, but the evidence says that there's, not any cases.
Yeah, there's nothing remotely that points to something of the fantastical at all. In fact, a 2.5-year investigation research project was done involving cases of spontaneous human combustion from 1752 to 1982 by Joe Nickell and John F. Fisher. Now, Nickell was a science investigator. Fisher was a forensic analysis. Once their research was done, they published their findings in 1984. Their investigation looked at cases in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, right? Their data says that the burned cadavers were always close to plausible sources for them starting on fire, such as candles, lamps, fireplaces, and so on. They concluded that most of these people were under the influence, which led to the carelessness around fire and sources of fire starters. Furthermore, the times where destruction was more, it was found that there was additional fuel sources were involved, such as chair stuffing, floor coverings, the flooring itself, and various flammable materials.
Their investigation, if I remember right, they mentioned the wick effect, sometimes known as the candle effect, right?
Yes, that is right. According to the two nearby objects often remained undamaged because fire tends to burn upwards but burns laterally with some difficulty. So yeah, they actually did mention the wick effect or the candle effect.
So 98% of these cases involve smoking, candles, or even fireplaces seem to be the actual cause, if you will.
Yeah, nothing mystical or paranormal here. In many of these cases, the people didn't move once they caught on fire due to their age or weight. Many died in their sleep. Some even had a heart attack most likely while they were on fire and died.
So most likely the cases are, due to other actual thing. Like the one guy, yeah, his stomach caught on fire, but it was kind of alcohol that he was drinking, and him being in an abandoned building, there was most likely some kind of fire started there that caused it, and so the fire didn't start within him.
Exactly. Like the fire didn't start within him. And I mean, you look at all these particular cases, and there's always some kind of source of fire, even with the ones dating back to the 17th and 18th and 19th century, before we get to the 20th century.
Exactly. There's always some kind of fire, source of fire. So it wasn't magical or, paranormal. Wow, it's good to know that none of these to worry about, I'd worry about that don't have to worry about catching on fire spontaneously at all. Like, we don't have to worry about that because that's not a thing.
No, it's not a thing. Like these, from our research that we done for this episode of Bizarre Ones, right? There's no evidence that somebody can spontaneously human combust. We obviously should be careful around fire, but I mean, these particular cases, like the Nichols and Fisher said, is because these people were careless around fire and flammable material. So yeah.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, that is good enough.
I mean, there was nothing that caused it within the body at all. And if I remember right, like, because most of the time when they first, came up with this theory of spontaneous human combustion was before they knew about the human body being made of mostly water, right?
Yeah, that is true. Like, it's before that anybody realized that the human body is mainly most of water. And in fact, if I remember right, I'd have to Google it, but if I remember right, the human body is like very,
hard to catch on fire because of how our body is made and that it takes really hot. Like, for instance, if I remember, like when they go to cremate your body, the temperature that they have to have it at is like very, very high because of our body being made of water.
Yeah, exactly. Like, in order to cremate somebody with the fire, the temperature has to be extremely high. So just be careful around fire and follow simple fire safety. Well, thank you, Tonya, for joining this, though I think I did all the talking.
Well, I don't think that you did all the talking. I did some talking as well. But yeah, no problem. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you in the next video. I guess in the next episode of the podcast for those of you that aren't watching it on YouTube.
Yeah, so that's all we have time for this episode of Bizarre Ones. That was Tonya Kitsune. She'll be hosting the next one, and of course, hopefully, I'm not sure if we're gonna keep on doing the panel part. We might. I hope we can, but it just depends on how the next episode comes out about, if you will. This one episode of Bizarre Ones was more of a debunking one, to be honest, and that might happen from time to time because there are certain phenomenon that we might talk about, and when we do the research for it, we might not be able to find anything that backs up the phenomenon. And there's nothing to back up this phenomenon that a fire originating inside the human body. Like Tonya mentioned, the human body is made most of water. In order for there to be cremation done, they have to have it such an extreme temperature. There's no way your body could produce that enough heat. Like, your body is not a battery, regardless of what the Wachowski sisters have to say. But anyways, like I said, that might happen from time to time where we're debunk it. So the next episode of Bizarre Ones will be about the Max Headroom broadcast signal hijacking, which I think will be a really good episode. Anyways, thank you for listening. I've been your host, Kai, and this has been Bizarre Ones. Until next time, stay bizarre.